Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk about the Beatles all the time, any aspect of their careers, their years together, their solo years, their music, their history, what's going on today. It's all covered here on this show, and I have lots of special guests that I welcome onto the program. This being around the time of John's birthday, I wanted to do something special, some kind of a tribute show for John. We're recording this on October the 11th. We tried to get it in time for the 9th. It's a few days late, but our hearts are into it. I have three special guests with me who have been on this channel a few times. First of all, Kiddo TOOLE. Gosh, if you don't know who she is, where have you been? She is one of my partners in crime in the talk show podcast Talk More Talk, a Solo-Beatles videocast, which is almost entirely about the solo careers of the Beatles. She's also the author of several books, including, I had to get several books ready here for this show. Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours through the Beatles' lesser known tracks. Also, Michael Jackson FAQ, all the stuff you know about the King of Pop. And more recently, with another colleague of ours, Ken Womack, Fandom and the Beatles. She is known as the queen of Beatles social media. We welcome her to our channel once again. Hi, Kit.
Hi, Ken. Great to be here and be here with such esteemed colleagues here as well.
Yeah, and I always like to say that you definitely always have the best backdrops of people that I welcome to this channel. Loved it. And that's my favorite Lennon album too.
I know.
Probably
Not an accident. I chose this one.
All right, we also have Glenn Greenberg with us. He was a guest not too long ago. You might recall that when Paul celebrated his 80th birthday, this issue came out of Time magazine, which was written by Glenn. And a couple years before that, he did one similar on John Lennon. He's got a new project he's going to tell us about later on, Beatle-wise, and really well-known issue covering Paul's entire career. And we welcome Glenn back. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for inviting me to be taking part in this. It's very exciting.
Yeah, we had a great conversation on Paul's career, and
We did.
it went on much longer. We'll have to resume that at some point. We also have with us John Borak, who's been on the channel a couple of times. I first interviewed John because he wrote an article not that long ago about how he felt that John Lennon's Imagine and Paul McCartney's Ram were his two favorite albums from 1971. I never spoke to him before, and I said, I got to talk to this guy. So I did have him on my radio show, Every Little Thing, and we talked about that. And I also had him on when his most recent book came out. This is called The Beatles 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatles History. It's really great. Covers the Beatle years, the solo years, important dates, what he considers to be the most important, the top 100. And as I just learned before we started to record this show, today this book just came out on paperback. So he is indeed a paperback writer.
Congratulations.
You got to slip in all these songs throughout the show.
Thank you. Well, you know, I also play drums in a Beatles cover band here in Southern California. And we've been playing paperback writer, and everyone has been saying, well, we have a real paperback writer in the band now. So yeah. Yeah.
Not only that, I should also mention that John has authored a few other books of interest, one on John Lennon called Life is What Happens, which came out in, was it 2008?
2010.
2010, okay. And if you are a fan of power pop, he's written two books, one called Shake Some Action, The Ultimate Power Pop Guide, and then Shake Some Action 2.0, a guide to the 200 greatest power pop albums from 1970 through 2017. We got to do a show on just the power pop side of the Beatles and some of your favorites who are influenced by the Beatles. And that can go on for hours.
Oh, yeah.
So John, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back. I'm looking forward to this, Ken. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I shouldn't forget that you also have been writing for Goldmine magazine for many years.
Yeah.
How long has that been?
Well, about years, many, many years. Believe it or not, and somebody actually asked me that question a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh my God, it's been 36 years. It's been a
Wow.
long, long time. So I'm now a contributing editor to Goldmine. I write for their print magazine as well as a website, and yeah, I enjoy doing it.
Okay, well, you're certainly keeping busy.
Oh yes.
All right, so the topic on the show, as I said, this is a tribute for John. I thought what I would do is ask my guests, well, to some people, it's just, these are simple questions, but for others, they can struggle with it. I wanted them to name what they feel is the best John Lennon song from his Beatle years. And that could be a song that he co-wrote with Paul, but it's a song that you most associate with John. Okay. And at the same time, name what you feel is the most underrated John Lennon song from his Beatle period. And then after that, we'll do the same thing for John's solo career. Best song, most underrated song. And then towards the end of the show, I'm giving my guests the option to either talk about their favorite John Lennon memory or talk about what you miss the most about John Lennon. Okay, so I'm sure there's going to be some very interesting selections. I'm wondering if there'll be any repeats, which is always possible. But the John Lennon catalog is so rich with so many great songs, Beatles and solo. Be interesting to know what my three guests have to say. And sorry, guys, but we have a queen here, and she's going to have to go first. We must defer to her. It's all men.
Oh,
We don't have to worry about that. But we're going to ask you the Beatle part first. Nick,
okay.
you think is
So,
the best song from John from the Beatle years?
boy, this was tough. This was tough to narrow down to one. I mean, ask me tomorrow and I'd probably, give you another answer. But I picked In My Life because I think this is a masterclass in songwriting. It really demonstrates what an incredible songwriter he was, and great vocalist as well. He called it his first major work, and I think that's certainly an apt description. And I think what makes it such a fascinating song is, first of all, I mean, not only does, of course, it pulls at the heartstrings, but it's a clever song too, because it initially, I think it's misinterpreted quite a bit, because there's more to it than meets the eye. Because what he is really, singing about is, I mean, he is being nostalgic, but he's also singing about the future. That the song is about the past and looking back longingly at the past and saying, I will always remember these wonderful people who were in my life in these great times, but in my life, I love you more. He's looking toward the future and the wonderful things that are going to happen with the person he loves now.
Right.
And I think sometimes that's overlooked in the song. And when you really look at the lyrics, there's just so much meaning there. And to think he was in it, early 20s when he wrote this, that's remarkable. I mean, that's such a kind of philosophical kind of reflection at such a young age. And to me, I am not a professional musician, like John, but if I were teaching a course in songwriting, I would point them to this, and say, this is how you write a song that has meaning, but also has a little twist to it. And this is something that John was really good at too. I'll be talking about that a little later as well. That he really knew how to force listeners to dig beneath the surface, and this was really an example of that, and just moves me to this day. Just a masterwork.
We've talked on Talk More Talk about how, mature the Beatles were for a very young age to come up with a song like this, or for Paul to write a song like Yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away. What was he? 22? 23 when he wrote that, and for George to write Within You Without You, something so complex, when he was also around 23, 24 when he wrote Within You Without You. So it's pretty amazing. And you know what you just reminded me of, when we've talked about things we said today, the song, there is that aspect of what Paul called future nostalgia.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like a similar thing going on within my life. And it is very unique in a way. There's so many great love songs that we've heard through time. But to make a statement that, there's a lot of people in my life that I've loved, but I love you more.
Yeah.
It's a different approach in a love song in a way. Yeah.
Mhm.
And like you said, pointing towards the future.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly.
And also name what you think is the most underrated John Lennon song from the Beatle period.
Well, I'm picking another one from the earlier period, and it's and again, really hard to pick, but um, again, showing off his uh, love of wordplay. I'll Cry Instead. I mean, I've always thought, boy, that was pretty nervy to start a pop song with "I've got every reason on earth to be mad." I mean, I thought, wow. I mean, that was pretty nervy to do in 1964. And I've always loved the line, "I've got a chip on my shoulder that's bigger than my feet." I mean, that is a great, great line, memorable. It's got that great opening that just, grabs you right away. In addition to that line, "I've got every reason on earth to be mad." It's got that, immediately that acoustic guitar, and then of course also the electric guitar as well with that line. It's, uh, uh, it has those darker lyrics. I mean, it definitely shows John's darker side, more forceful side, but it still has that kind of pop sensibility. The middle eight has really catchy. It just shows, the depth that was there, even if it was, as I said, a bit on the darker side. But it showed his love of wordplay, and it showed his willingness to, stretch the boundaries of what a pop song could be.
Mm,
That, as I said, that he would have the nerve to start a pop song like that. I just think that was an early indicator of how John was ready to break the mold of, "Oh, you want me to write another, along with Paul, I Want to Hold Your Hand?
mm.
Let's do this."
Mm,
And it's still a great song, maybe a little darker, but he's still writing in that, wanting to grab the listener's attention, and the great catchy chord changes, but he's still engaging in that wordplay, and wanting to, uh, as I said, stretch the boundaries of what a happy pop song can be.
right. I love how you pointed out that line, "I've got a chip on my shoulder that's bigger than my feet." It shows his vulnerability, which I
Mhm.
was kind of rare for a male to do in a pop song.
Yeah, and that was another thing he did quite a bit, and I write about that in songs we were singing. That was another thing he would do in many songs, like "I'll Be Back" and some others, that he would put himself in these vulnerable positions in his songs. And yeah, as you said, that was not typical of the era. For sure, with pop songs and love songs, and also again just really showed this willingness to play with the so-called traditional pop formula, and he would continue doing that in the Beatles and in a solo career.
Very true. Any of you guys want to comment on Kit's choices?
Well, only that I won't have much to add for my first one.
Uh-oh.
You said it all.
Uh-oh.
No, I can put a more personal spin on it, but
Mhm.
no, beautifully put.
Okay. John, anything?
Well, Kid also stole mine. That was, but
Sorry.
I thought ahead and I picked three just in case because there's so many and it's easy to pick a great John Lennon song because there's a lot of great John Lennon songs. So
Mhm.
but I agree with the whole breaking the pop song mold concept that Kit was bringing up. And I was thinking of other songs around that same era when he was doing that. Help being the most notable example. I don't want to
Mhm.
spoil the party. I'm a loser.
Mhm.
Nobody was singing that kind of stuff. Everyone was doing the Freddie, in 1965. And John is singing "Help Me" and "I'm a Loser," and it was just really ahead of his time.
Yeah, you think about the very beginning of Beatles for Sale. Those first three songs are all kind of negative about the relationship that
Yeah.
John's going through at that time, It's not happy-go-lucky, like Kid said, I want to hold your hand, or, you know.
Yeah, well, that whole album is sort of, at least the originals, because it's half covers, half originals, but the
Mm,
originals are all sort of downcast, and or a lot of them are, and you look at their faces on the cover,
mm.
and they looked very, very tired.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were worn out.
Yeah. So excellent choices there from Kit.
Thank you.
I wouldn't expect otherwise.
Thank you, Ken.
John, we'll let you be next.
Right. Well, as I said, In My Life was going to be my number one choice because definitely a stunning example of John's songcraft. But I did have a couple of others, and the one I'm going to mention is a later song from Abbey Road, "Come Together."
Hmm.
Um, I just think that's classic Lennon. It rocks. It's got a lot of his really cool wordplay. The thing that I love about it is when we play this song with my Beatles cover band, you see people singing along to the lyrics, even though they have no idea what they mean, and they probably don't mean anything. They're just words. But I'd like to ask somebody, you're singing about a walrus gumboot. What exactly is that? You know, I,
Mm.
it's just him throwing words around that kind of fit, but they really fit the whole groove of that song. And I've read the things that Paul has said that he sort of came up with that sort of swampy groove to the song. But you have to wonder how much of that was John also. 'Cause after all, he wrote it. But I just think it's a great example of later period John Lennon rock and roll, and definitely, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but it's definitely probably one of his best songs and one of his best known songs.
Okay. It's funny. I just did a show on Things We Said Today, well, one of my podcasts, with Jay Bergen, who was John's defense attorney in the Morris Levy Roots trial and everything. And we had to bring up Come Together because everything originated from John lifting a line from You Can't Catch Me from Chuck Berry's song. It wasn't exactly word for word. He'll Here Come All Flat. But as Paul has explained it, originally Come Together was a faster song. And he wanted to disguise the song because maybe it was too close in sound, and even melodically, it's a little similar to Chuck Berry's song. So maybe by slowing it down, then, you can get by and people won't see the similarities there.
Right.
So that was the purpose behind that, really. It is
Yeah.
kind of interesting since I'm in radio, and in classic rock radio, I can tell you the number one Beatles song that gets played has Come Together. And it's been that way for many years. And as someone who recognizes so many Beatles songs as being classics, I can't tell you why that one is singled out. But, you know, people must obviously love it because there's a lot of research done and tests done how people feel about certain songs. But Come Together is the one that gets the most airplay these days.
I think a lot of the Beatles' more popular songs now were songs from Abbey Road. Something and Here Comes the Sun are always really high on the
Mm,
sales list on Apple Music or iTunes or whatever it's called these days.
right.
People really seem to like the Abbey Road record, obviously, because it's great, and maybe because Come Together was a lead-off track there. People are more familiar with it, but Yeah, I'm not sure why they would be more popular than necessarily any other one, but it is definitely a great one, and it sounds unlike really any other Beatles song. And that was one of the great things about the Beatles is that they rarely, if ever, repeated themselves.
Hmm.
Had a song that sounded exactly like another song. There were some that were similar, obviously, but for the most part, you know, Come Together doesn't sound like anything else they ever did. And it's got that great bass and drum interplay. Like I said, it's got John's uh, cool lyrics and it's got a great lead vocal to it.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of fun. You know, it's one of their best songs, I would definitely say.
Not going to argue with you, but I also know that the way that classic rock radio has been for a long time, um, as audiences get older and older and they don't want to attract an older audience, they move the playlist to later dates. Like you hear very little 60s.
Right.
And if you're going to hear any 60s, that's going to be from 1967 on, which
Yeah.
is a crime. But so you're not going to hear anything pre
Oh yeah.
Pepper or Penny Lane Strawberry Fields. So any music from 67 on has an advantage in that format of radio.
Hmm. Yeah, our local oldies station here now plays music only from the 80s and 90s, and I
Yep.
feel really, really old when I hear music from the 90s being called an oldie. Ugh.
You want to know how to feel old, John? I just went to a club where they had a tribute band for Blink 182. I feel like
Wow.
they just came out.
Wow.
Wow.
That's funny.
Anyway, so most underrated John Lennon Beatles song.
Well, I've got a list of 7.
I only asked for one,
Oh,
but
I know, and I'm only going to tell you one, but I think this one is very underrated and one of John's best sort of early to mid period compositions. No Reply.
mm,
Always been one of my favorite songs, and I think it's sorely underrated. Um, the most amazing thing about that song, which still gives me chills every time I listen to it or play it or whatever, is the bridge. The bridge is amazing. Then when Paul comes in with the high harmony on the
uh,
second half of the bridge, oh, I'm getting chills just talking about it. It's incredible.
mm,
And I have a friend who's a fellow Beatles fan, and we played in Beatles bands together. And he said, that's the most amazing bridge, but they only do it once. You think they would have come back to it and did it a second time, but just once. And it's just an incredible song. Um, Ringo's drumming again is really cool, and the whole beat, it's kind of almost like a tango sort of beat, I guess.
mhm.
Uh, Again, different really from anything else they ever did, and I think it's sorely underrated in their catalog.
One of the things that the Beatles did, I love to bring this up every now and again, is when they add this bridge or some other section to a song, like you just mentioned, and they don't repeat it. It's just thrown in there. Like the
Yeah,
same thing happened in I'll Be Back. You
right.
know, the I thought that you would realize that part is never repeated. It's just thrown in there.
Yeah,
They just, they gave you more for your money, and they packed it all in, 2 to 3 minute song, and it's incredible what they were doing.
and that's another sorely underrated track too.
Yeah,
I'll be back.
there's plenty.
Definitely.
All right, Glenn, you're next.
Okay, well, my pick for greatest, again, I can't have too much more to add than what Kidder already said about it so beautifully. But all I can say about In My Life, I've always found it incredibly relatable. And I believe the word nostalgic was used. But I found the lyrics just beautiful lyrics, a wonderful melody,
Hmm.
wonderfully complex. I love the harpsichord part. And it's surprisingly sentimental and more sweet than you would expect from John. That part where he goes, of all these friends and lovers, there's no one compares to you. You just don't see John being that giving, and that sort of demonstrative with his emotions, usually. And you know, he has that wall that he puts up, and this is just, it breaks down that wall, and I found it very, very touching. I've always found it very touching, and it was my wedding song, so it
Oh,
has a lot of special meaning for me on that level as well. But I loved it even long before. Uh, but when it came time to choose what our wedding song was going to be, there was no question in my mind that it was going to be that. And so on that level, it's I just think the best way I can boil it down is it's for me, it's his most touching song.
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, it's no argument there. I always get chills every time I hear that song.
Me too.
Yeah, we just lost John.
Yep.
Hopefully
Oh,
he'll be back.
did I offend him?
I was thinking he was enjoying that drink way too much.
That's what I was thinking too. That was a long drink.
But yeah, from the very beginning, just those harmonies get me. You know, from this first word, there are places I'll remember. Yeah, it's an incredible sentiment, and you know, in my life, if I had to pick, I have a tough time between In My Life and Strawberry Fields Forever. But In My Life is one of those songs where I can listen to it every day for the rest of my life and never tire of it. You know, and that's a rarity right there. You know, I mean, I could say that about a lot of Beatles songs, but certainly that one. That's one that I really treasure right there. So what would be your pick for underrated?
For underrated, I pick it as the most underrated, and it's also the coolest John song for the Beatles, and that is Rain.
Hmm,
Mm.
okay.
I love the heavy sound. I mean, the lyrics aren't all that profound, but they flow beautifully. And the vocals, the solo, the harmony, the sound is absolutely great. I find it to be a riveting song. And just from the opening drums, it's for my personal tastes, aesthetically speaking, it's as, you know, as close to perfect a song as you can get. And the fact that it was a B-side, I just think is, I mean, how many bands would kill to have that just
Hmm,
as just, you know, their only song, let alone a B-side. I just think it's such a cool song. The coolest of the non-hits, you know.
right.
I love that song.
Hmm, okay. You know, I gotta admit something here. You know, one of the things I love about doing you know, asking people their opinions, I was expecting, you know, the top hierarchy of Lennon songs there would be A Day in the Life, Strawberry Fields, I Am the Walrus, and none of you mentioned those. It's great, but that just tells you, you know, how thoroughly solid from the beginning to the end of the Beatles catalog it really is. And you can easily pick In My Life or Help or something early from them, but it's great. And John picked Come Together. So good to have you back, John.
Thank you. Just kind of an unexpected error on the computer, so I'm on the phone. I'm not sure what happened. I apologize.
Okay. So we're going to move on right now to John's solo career. And this time, why don't we start with John? Best John Lennon solo song.
Best John Lennon solo song. Well, it would be easy to say Imagine. That's certainly the best known, and of course, an iconic tune. But the one I'm going to pick, I think, is his best, and it's also my favorite, and that's Number 9 Dream
Hmm.
from Walls and Bridges. I've always just loved the lushness of that song. I love his vocal. The melody is just beautiful. Again, it gives me chills whenever I hear it, and that's, you know, of course, one of the marks of a wonderful tune. You know, definitely, I think the highlight of Walls and Bridges for me was that song, even though Whatever Gets You Through the Night was the number one hit from the album. I always thought Number 9 Dream was a superior song, and just really, really beautiful. And again, doesn't really sound like anything else John ever did. I just, yeah, I've always loved it, you know. And on a personal note, my mom's favorite number was 9. So whenever I hear the song, I think of her. So that's another reason why it means a lot to me.
I guess the same thing with Revolution #9. You think of her when you get it.
Always, always. Yeah.
But really, when I hear #9 Dream, it makes me think about the psychedelic surrealism, the Strawberry Fields Forever period. That's what comes to my mind. But it doesn't.
Yeah. It's kind of a cross between that and the sort of again using the word lush production values of the mid 70s that were used around that time. Just the strings and just the whole vibe of the song is really beautiful. And again, John was the one who was known for, he was the rocker and Paul was the balladeer. But, we talked about In My Life earlier, and plenty of other songs John wrote. He's a very tender guy when it came to a lot of his songwriting. And #9 Dream is sort of another one of those. And, I've always been super fond of it.
There's a lot of great ballads and the softer side of John throughout his solo career. It's some amazing tunes there. All right, what would you pick for most underrated solo song?
Uh-oh.
Uh,
We lose him
Oh,
again.
he froze again.
thinking real hard on this one. I guess he's gonna have to cut out and come back in again.
Yeah.
Apologize to everybody watching this, but
Give me
I think you'll have to try coming back again, John.
Some Truth would be considered underrated anymore.
John, we really can't hear you.
Yeah.
So maybe you should just try coming back again. Sorry, but we're having a problem audio-wise with you.
Yep.
Okay, so apologize to you folks. So let's move on and we'll have Glenn talk about.
Every time I talk, John drops out. Have you noticed that?
You're the cause.
All right. So for greatest solo, I picked Jealous Guy because I felt it was, for me, it's all about the mood that it evokes, and it's all about what captures my attention. And with Jealous Guy, it's the melody. And once I'm caught by the melody, I pay attention to the lyrics. I found the lyrics to be just really, again, beautiful, confessional. It made me wonder who he was, aiming the lyrics towards. I always assumed it was Yoko. I've heard in more recent years, apparently Paul said that John once told him that Jealous Guy was written for him, or it was written about Paul.
I've heard that, but someone has to confront Paul and have him elaborate on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Before anybody starts spreading the word that it's definitely about Paul.
Yeah. But either way, I found it to be just a really, I guess compelling is a good word for this song. And especially, and I gained more appreciation for it about 25 years ago when I got my hands on the Artifacts box set of bootlegs, and I got to hear Child of Nature for the first time.
Right.
And found Jealous Guy to be such a vast improvement over Child of Nature. I was like, wow, that's a real evolution here. That's a real quantum leap forward. So I gained a whole new appreciation for the song after that. So yeah, of all the songs from John's solo catalog, I think that's the one that I tend to revisit the most. The one that I kind of like force into my head when I want to think of a John Lennon song. It would be Jealous Guy. I just think it's a terrific song.
Oh, no doubt about it. And the whole arrangement of it's beautiful. The piano, Nicky Hopkins on the piano, and the whistling in the middle, the whistling.
Yep.
And yeah, it's very tender. It's very beautiful. And once you learn about Child of Nature, and the Beatles had written so much stuff when they were in India, they couldn't fit it all on a double album. And I guess because Paul had his song Mother Nature's Son, they didn't want to have two nature songs. That's it's a theory anyway.
Yeah.
But we're certainly glad that he kept that melody and rewrote the lyrics. Yeah, Definitely one of his best. All right, good selection. Let's go back to you, John. I hope we don't lose you again.
You know, I tried the laptop, I tried the phone. If this doesn't work, I'm going to try 2 tin cans and a string and see if that'll work.
I know.
Jeez.
Morse code.
I guess. Technology's a great thing when it works, and today it's not working. So I apologize.
Touch. I'll get with the spirit of Magic Alex, and maybe he can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Magic Alex has overtaken my phone and my computer. That's the problem. Anyway, where did you lose me? I'm not sure where I left off.
Underrated John Lennon solo song.
Underrated. Okay. I was saying I'm not sure if "Give Me Some Truth" would be considered underrated or not.
It's pretty well known at this point.
Well, then let's go with a different one. Let's go with one from your favorite album, Mind Games. I've always been a big fan of "Bring On the Lucy, Free to People."
Okay.
I've just always really dug that song. It's funky. It's got some pretty pointed lyrics. You know, the line in there about "while you're jerking off each other," which was, not something you really heard back in the 70s on Solo-Beatle record. Just kind of a different sort of groove, different sort of vibe to it, and very catchy. I mean, I find myself singing the chorus quite often just because it's very memorable. And the slide guitar is a big part of the song too. So that's one that I think is pretty underrated.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed, as much as I don't like labels, but slogan rock, like power to the people and give peace a chance. And this is in the same category, but it's so catchy. And, one of the greatest assets of John's recordings is his voice. And he's such a great singer on this song, like he is on all of his songs, really.
Yeah.
Chords, though, it kind of reminds me very much of If Not For You. You think about it. But still,
yeah, the slide guitar part, I can see the similarity there a little bit.
Yeah. Excellent choice. All right, Kit. It's all up to you now.
All right. Doesn't Glenn need to finish? I think Glenn.
We can get back to me if you want.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh,
I never did underrated.
Okay.
Yeah, he needs to do underrated.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I screwed everything up. I'm sorry, guys.
All your fault, John. Anyway, Glenn, most underrated John Lennon.
I chose crippled inside.
Okay.
Just because I mean it could be such a dark, depressing, soul-bearing song, and yet it's so poppy and so upbeat. It's like subversively commercial, which I know was the whole point of the Imagine album. But that I felt like it was really, really in play on that song, and I find it quite infectious, despite the somewhat dark and gloom and doom lyrics. It's as simple as that, really. I mean, I can't give you more of a deep analysis than that. I love the sound. I love the subversiveness. I love, it's kind of like the same principle as Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Pretty dark material in the most poppy kind of sounding song you could possibly imagine.
I always remember, was either John or Paul saying that they learned a lot from Carole King as a songwriter, in the sense that she could write about something that's depressing, and it's an upbeat tune. And it could sound happy.
Yeah.
So that little twist that the Beatles would put into their songs and in their solo careers, I guess, that was an influence there. I'm not saying this specific song with Crippled Inside, and John called it, corny country song, but it's such a great line. One thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside. And it's very, it's very sensitive lyrics and introspective lyrics from John. And yet at the same time, it's up tempo and commercial, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I always wondered if he made it sound so commercial sort of in reference to Paul, since I think the lyrics kind of referred to Paul a little bit, or at least the way John was feeling about Paul at that time. I always wondered if he sort of, made the music really poppy and upbeat, sort of like Paul would have done, just sort of in reference to him. But maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know.
Okay. A lot of Beatle fans do that. All right, Kit, you're next.
Oh, before I get into it, I love Crippled Inside. I mean, I only didn't choose it this time because I've talked about it a lot before, but that's an excellent choice. And also, I'm just so glad I can be here with people that we can make an Magic Alex joke and we're all like dying laughing. I mean, I love being with my people. Anyway.
Today more often.
I know, absolutely. Okay, so this was another case really hard to choose, but I went today with Instant Karma, as I quote this song all the time. It just has some great lines in it. And I mean, I just think this is one of his finest vocal performances. You've got that Phil Spector production, who I didn't used to be a huge fan of Phil Spector production, but it really works on this. I mean, those first two lines, Instagram is going to get you, going to knock you right on the head. I mean, this song knocks you right on the head from the get-go, with Alan White's drums and the piano, the keyboards, and I mean that great reverb on John's voice. And it's just, I think, a great example. You were talking a moment ago, Ken, about slogan rock, and I think that's actually something John did really well. And I actually wrote a piece about this in Beatle Fan years ago, how he really took that part of Yoko's art, that she really in the Fluxus art movement, how they took things like advertising and slogans and turned it into art. And he and Yoko took that form and said, hey, why can't we use that catchphrases to promote peace? And
Right.
so so for a song like this, when you see the term instant karma exclamation point, I mean, they were using it as kind of a slogan. And I mean, what a great slogan. Instant karma is going to get you. I mean, I quote that phrase all the time. It is such a memorable phrase.
Right.
So, I mean, the lyrics, the production, that, I use it even to test speakers because it's such a great production. It just hits you right away. Grabs you, by the collar and makes you listen. And as I said, his vocals are just, I know we all know that John famously hated his voice. Well, his voice is just stellar on this track.
There's nothing like that screaming voice from John.
Yep.
And look, I love John's voice when he's got reverb on it. I love it when it's raw.
Yep.
There is something he wanted. I think he told Phil Spector, like, this is 50s rock. So he wanted reverb on his voice. And yeah, I love it just the way it is. I think Phil Spector knew what to do for John and for George on All Things Must Pass. That's a whole other conversation. He also knew how to hold back with John, like during Plastic Ono Band, for example. So yeah, no argument there. Instant Karma. I tell you, it's there's something about songs that you've heard your whole life and you never get tired of them, no matter how many times you've heard them. Instant Karma is another one of those songs, like I said, in my life that I can hear every day, and I'm gonna scream that chorus. I'm gonna sing along with it. And yeah, I love Alan White's drums on there too. Man, he added so much on drums. Great, right there too. But yeah, Instant Karma, great choice. And now, underrated.
underrated, and this is from an album that I thought for a long time was underrated, but I think it's gotten more respect in recent years. So What You Got from Walls and Bridges. I
Hmm.
love Walls and Bridges. And What You Got, when I was making my notes for the show tonight, and I was, you know, perusing some old reviews of Walls and Bridges, and I was kind of surprised at the negative criticism that the song got at the time. I mean, it was just kind of, oh, it went nowhere, and I always thought this is another case of a song that as I mentioned earlier, it's you have to look beneath the surface a bit. I always thought it was a pretty clever song. When he sings at one point, because first of all, it's got that great funk
Yeah.
sound to it, and when he's singing, and again with that great rock voice he has when he gets that rasp in there, and
Hmm.
he says, well, it's Saturday night and I just got to rip it up.
Yeah.
And so at first you think, oh, this is gonna be a song about him just living up, partying, and but of course that's not what it's about. Then he sings, come Monday morning I just got to run away. And then of course you don't know what you got until you lose it, and you of course know this is really about the regrets he's going through as he's going through the lost weekend. So on the one hand you hear this great funk guitar and him yelling, all right, no, that's but this isn't a song about partying. I mean, this is a song about regret and about him feeling empty. Yeah, and that's what I like about it. That it's that's this sound, this what he was so good at songwriting and setting this mood. But if you listen beneath, look beneath the surface, it's about something else. And that's what, as I said, John Lennon was so good at it, as turning around expectations, whether he was, as we talked about, subverting what the traditional pop song is, or forcing you to listen deeper to what the song actually means and that kind of thing. And What You Got is another example of it, that it's a great R&B funk kind of song, but it's about something more serious than that. And
Yeah.
so I've always loved this track.
And we know that John loved R&B, and as I love bringing up the fact that he himself said that the song, that groove that was played with the guitars there, came from For the Love of Money from the OJ.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So
So
another great reason to love it.
yeah, and I love the whole horn section and everything. And I can't believe that was a B-side.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of those things, to me, that merited being A-side status. It's so damn catchy, and like we said, those great Lennon vocals.
Oh
Yeah,
incredible.
What You Got. I'm right with you there, Kit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so finally, I'm going to ask each of you to either share with us your favorite memory of John. So many of them. How difficult is that? Or what you miss the most about John. It's hard to believe how long it's been since he was taken from us. But let's start this time with Glenn.
Well, because of my age, I'm a second generation Beatles fan. Obviously, I missed them when they were together, and my Beatle fandom began in 1977 with the release of the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl. That was my first Beatles album, and that for me was the A-bomb. That just is where it all began. Up until then, I was a huge Monkees fan. It was on the air every day. I'd come home from school, watch the Monkees. I listened to the albums. Once that Beatles album came out, Monkees who? I just completely put it aside, and I became a Beatles fanatic. So fast forward to 1980, and I just spent the last 2-3 years wondering when the Beatles are going to get back together already. I mean, they've got to get back together, right? I mean, come on. How could they not? They're the Beatles. And for me, my first real John Lennon memory, as opposed to the Beatles, was when Starting Over came out. because it was the first new John Lennon song to come out after I discovered the Beatles. Up until that point, it was pretty much, it was all Paul, you know, because of all the radio play he was getting on the radio. You know, I was familiar with quite a few of Paul's songs, solo stuff at that point. John, not so much. And so Starting Over came out, and I remember liking the song and not even knowing it was John Lennon until I happened to be I had just started junior high school. I was in my first couple of months of junior high school at that point, and somebody happened to mention John Lennon is in association with Starting Over. And I was like, that's John Lennon? And they're like, yeah, don't you check the Billboard charts? I said, no. I was 11 years old. Who was checking the Billboard charts at that age? But that's when I first discovered that this song that I was already liking, Starting Over, was John Lennon. And then I have to say within a few days was December 8th. So that's where, you know, it was all in the mix at that point. So I can't say it's my favorite John Lennon memory, but it's a good John Lennon memory. It's a memory from that brief period where he was alive, and I was cognizant of what he was up to. And it was just a song that I really gravitated towards without even knowing it was him, which is, to me, the mark of a really good song. And so that to me is the most indelible and the earliest John Lennon memory that I have.
So when you heard Starting Over, that voice didn't sound familiar to you at all? You didn't?
No, it was because you know, he was kind of putting on that. To me, what I heard when I first Starting Over, I heard that kind of Elvis affect that he had in his voice, and that's what I latched onto. It's been so long since we took the, you know, that's the part that I heard. So when he kind of slips back into his Lennon voice, that kind of went right past me because I was focused on the Elvis kind of thing that he was doing. So I do remember that, as you can see, I remember that vividly. No, I was fixated on the Elvis affect that he was doing at the beginning of the song.
Yeah, well, I can relate to so much of what you just said there, Glenn, because the last half of the 70s, when John was away from the public eye, you know, I wasn't thinking at all about a Beatles reunion, but I did want John to come back. And I would always hear rumors, oh, he's going to make a new album. Did you hear? And I get my hopes up and nothing would happen. So finally, when Starting Over did come out and I heard it for the first time, and I worked at a record store at the time, the same record store the night of December 8th. But and I remember holding the 45 of Starting Over, and I was so happy. I was kissing the 45. It's like I waited 5 years for this, you know. And then yeah, everybody there in the store knew how happy I was, and I played Double Fantasy so much, and then we all know what happened after that. But yeah, but Starting Over is a great memory for me, nonetheless, to hear anything new from John. But yeah, John, how about you?
Well, you know, the memory of December 8th is, it feels like it was just yesterday, really. It doesn't feel like it was 42 years ago, because the memory is still so fresh in my mind. I remember what I was doing, where I was, you know, the aftermath, and just basically crying for 2 weeks straight, you know, like so many other people did who were Beatles fans. And yeah, it was a rough time for sure. You know, what I would like to say though is what I miss the most is when I think of all the things John could have done, you know, in the 42 years that he's been gone. Not only musically, but socially, and as an advocate for peace, as a writer, you know, so much he could have done to help this world in so many different ways. And that's what I miss the most. I miss the man. The fact that he stood up for what he believed in. You know, he didn't care what others said about him. He was going to do whatever the hell he wanted to do. and of course, the bonus was that he made some amazing music. But it's just, it's incredible to think that he's been gone longer than he was alive. It's just incredible to think that, because really does seem just like yesterday when that happened, because like I said, the memory is so fresh. But he packed a lot into those 40 years, did so much and did so much good. Again, not only musically, but a peace advocate, and as a writer, and as a husband and father, and whatnot. Just an amazing human being, and that's what I'll remember most about him.
If I could just cut in for a second, do any of you guys watch the TV show For All Mankind?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
It presents an alternate history of the Earth, where the Russians beat us to the moon, and how society would have changed as a result of that. And as they get into the 1980s, they don't explain how, but somehow John Lennon is not killed on December 8th, 1980. And the Cold War continues. And one of the news stories that they have on TV, like around 1987, as Reagan and Gorbachev are trying to settle the Cold War and everything, is John Lennon's going to have a peace rally in, I guess, maybe Central Park or at the Berlin Wall or something, but like 1 million people show up for this concert that John Lennon organizes. And if I can't remember if the Beatles actually get together, but for sure, it's John Lennon organizes this concert. And just to piggyback on what you said, John, me too. I mean, that's his perspective is what I really miss. His voice, not just his singing voice, but his voice on what's going on in the world. And that show, For All Mankind, almost makes me wish that the Russians had beaten us to the moon.
Yeah,
Almost. Right.
Yeah.
I would just like to add, I'm so grateful you guys are saying this, because I miss the man and his opinions and giving interviews and telling the world what his state of mind was at the moment. I get kind of upset when people say, well, you got to take what John said with a grain of salt because he changed his opinions all the time. Yeah, but he was human, and he was still honest about how he felt in the moment with everything that he said. And when I missed him the most, obviously, it would have been so fascinating to know where he would have gone musically. But like when 9/11 happened, I wanted to hear John's voice to say something. January 6th, when something like that happens in our country, just to get his perspective. In some ways, it wouldn't even matter whether you agree with him or not. It's just having that voice there that has been a part of you, part of your DNA for so long, has meant so much, and I agreed with his politics anyway, but even still, those particular moments, and of course, missing what he could have given us musically. But anyway, but those real key pivotal moments at 9/11, I was always thinking, what would John be saying right now?
Yeah.
Not only caring about the world, but living in New York,
Yeah. And then you think, boy, he would have really been active on social media.
Yeah.
He would have used that as a promotional tool, and a tool to, spread the word about peace or activism or whatever it was he was promoting at the time. And yeah, it was like losing a member of the family. It really was. And I remember my dad, who had very little patience for that kind of thing, because he was more old school, saying, why are you crying? It's not like he's a member of your family. And I said, no, it's like he is, because I felt that close to him.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just because he bared his soul to the world. He told you how he felt about everything. I've been commenting ever since, and it shouldn't have been just for this event, but when the Give Me Some Truth compilation came out, there's all these interview quotes from John and Yoko, and my God, they're so honest. about everything. It's so rare to see people, you know, actually say how they feel about everything, the faults in their relationships. You know, how many people do that? Know?
Yeah.
And we're doing it a long time ago. You know, so he always felt really close to John because he told you exactly how he felt. You know, he was the man who said, "Give me some truth," and I believe that, you know, he was honest with all of his interviews, even though he changed a lot, his views on things. But Kit, what are your feelings on this subject?
Well, first of all, John, when you were saying about social media, I agree. I think, you know, I've often thought that, you know, John, you know, was so fascinated by technology in many ways. And yeah, and I think about that, what he could have done with, you know, with video. I'm just, the mind boggles as to, you know, what he could have done, and it would have been a whole new vehicle for him. I mean, YouTube and as you said, all kinds of social media to spread his message. I think he would have loved it. I mean, I think he would have, and along with Yoko, I think they could have created, you know, whole new kinds of art. I mean, I think that would have been right up their alley, to do that. And I also just wanted to share, you know, I posted about this on my Facebook page the other day, that whenever I hear "Nobody Told Me," I always smile, because that was kind of when I was first exposed to John as a solo artist. 'Cause, you know, I was 8 when he died, and so I didn't really feel the way, you know, you felt, John and Ken, and you know, when he died, because, you know, I didn't really know him that well. I wasn't really conscious of. I mean, I knew who the Beatles were and all
Hmm.
that, but I wasn't like really into them yet. I mean, I was, you know, just a kid. But I remember when Milk and Honey came out in '84, and there was a video put together, you know, from
Right.
like John and Yoko's home movies and all, and that was shown quite a bit. And I remember seeing that, you know, Chicago was kind of slow to get cable, and so that we had these kind of local music video shows, you know, pre MTV, and they would show the "Nobody Told Me" video. So I was about 12, you know, when I saw this, and I mean, again, I knew who John Lennon was, but I wasn't into the Beatles yet. That'd be another year or two before I started really getting into them.
Hmm.
And when I saw the video and heard the song, um, I was just really drawn to it. I just thought it was, first of all, the lyrics, of course, are kind of, you know, were humorous and kind of quirky. So I think that drew me in immediately. But I just also, I think, we're drawn into those, you know, the videos of seeing, you know, John and Yoko and Sean, and, you know, seeing them together as a family. And I think I was just intrigued by it. And but mainly, I think I just love the song. And every time I hear it, you know, I think of, that's kind of, in a way, was my introduction to him as a solo artist.
Hmm.
And I, you know, and then I was kind of interested in him from then on. Although I probably listened to the Beatles more, and then started getting his really started buying his solo stuff.
Hmm.
But that was probably my first introduction to him. And so every time I hear that song, and I still love it to this day. I still think it's a great song, and again, terrific songwriting. I you know, just always smile, because I just think of, you know, that was my early introduction to him as a solo artist.
Hey, it's a good introduction. Just
Yep.
a great rock song like that can just, you know, lift you up and get you interested in the artist from the very beginning.
Mhm.
Great hook in that song.
Yep.
Never stopped writing great songs and having great hooks in so
Mhm.
many. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, this has been great. the three of you sharing your favorite songs and memories about John. And actually, Glenn, I want to make sure I don't forget this. You have an announcement to make about your next project.
Yes, I don't have a pub date yet, but the working title of my next bookazine is called The Book of Beatles Trivia, and it's 9 chapters that take you through the entire history of the Beatles in the first 4 chapters. Then there are 4 chapters, one about each Beatle separate, and then the final chapter is about the solo years. So the way it's broken down, it's not like a multiple choice quiz book or anything like that. Is we break it down into what we think will be interesting, informative, intriguing questions, and then lengthy answers about 150-word paragraphs that answer the question, give you a little bit more facts, figures, some insight, context. And it's been a lot of fun. It's for people who don't know anything about the Beatles, and for people who, I try to get a little bit obscure also. So we go from a simple question like, how did John meet Yoko, to a question about Son of Dracula. So if you don't know what the reference to Son of Dracula refers to, this is the book for you, because you're going to find out.
Or you can find out on Talk More Talk, because at some point we're going to do a show on Son of Dracula. Come hell or
Yes,
water, we're going to do it.
we are.
I think it's actually on YouTube.
It is. I
Yeah.
used it as research.
All right. Yeah, Ringo with Harry Nilsson. Can't beat those two.
Well,
Yeah.
you just blew one of the answers to my questions.
But I'm sure the bookazine will be worthwhile.
Yep,
pick.
absolutely.
John, anything you want to plug of anything that you're working on right now?
Well, just that the paperback version of the Beatles 100 is out today. Available on Amazon or from the Rare Bird publication website. Also just produced an compilation album for Spider Pop Records out of Texas, called We All Shine On, a tribute to the music of 1970.
All right.
A couple of Beatles related tracks on there. There's a cover of Come and Get It. It's also a cover of What Is Life. And then other songs from 1970 as well, covered by independent artists. So very excited about that. And that's available online as well.
I love that kind of stuff. I am very much a top 40 person from my childhood on. So I grew up on the hits of that
Same
time.
here.
And 60s and 70s, and to a lesser degree the 80s are my favorite decades. But the top 40 for me of the 70s, especially the first half of the 70s, will probably always be my favorite right there.
Yeah,
So
I would agree. And it's funny, there's so many great songs just from the year 1970. It was hard to narrow it down to 22 on a single CD and digital release. But I put together a short list, and the short list was 60 tracks, and I'm sure I left some out. So it was a pretty amazing year. And CD's been getting some good reviews so far. It's been played on Little Steven's Underground Garage, and very excited about it.
all right, very good. I'll have to check that out. Maybe we'll work that into another show, John.
Excellent.
All right, Kit, anything that you want to plug?
Sure. I'm going to be teaching part 2 of my Roots of Rock and Roll class for Monmouth University starting in early December. And we're going to be covering country, Western swing, skiffle. We'll Beatles reference there, and much more. So there'll be a 3-week class, and registration is open now. I'll send you the link, Ken, and you can post that. And I will also be a guest on, I think it's December 6th. I'll send you that as well, for the Tuesday Night Record Club. And we're going, that's hosted by our good friend Ken Womack. And we're going to be covering Aretha Franklin's Young, Gifted, and Black. And that is absolutely free. You can register for that. Really looking forward to that as well. So, so yeah, got those 2 things coming up.
Always good things coming with you. You got to sneak Crippled Inside into that country.
That's right. Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. I can do that.
All right, guys, this has been tremendous. Thanks so much for taking part in this John Lennon tribute. I hope everybody watching enjoyed the show. And anytime you guys want to come back, just let me know. This channel is your channel. Okay.
Yep,
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you next time.